Who's the lead attorney in the defunding lawsuit. James, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, David. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
So first, let's get into the lawsuit itself. What was before the court?
So we asked the court to simply uphold what the city charter requires as the minimum number of officers on the police force. Minneapolis, as we all know, had a police force that dwindled substantially throughout 2020 after the riots and then ongoing disarray in the city. And our clients are residents of the north side of Minneapolis, and they were fed up with the criminal element running amok and said it's time to take action. So we brought the lawsuit on their behalf to stop the police defunding.
What was, or is really, it shouldn't be was, but what is the calculus that leads to the minimum number of 731 police officers and the support components that are needed with that?
Right, and this is a central question in the case. So the city charter, in 1961, there was a crime wave in Minneapolis, and the city folks said, we don't like this. We're not okay with crime rising. So they added, and they adopted a 65% majority, adopted an amendment to the Minneapolis city charter that required 0.0017 officers per resident of Minneapolis. And that's based on the census data provided by the federal government. So in Minneapolis, there's about 429,000 people. You multiply that by 0.0017 and you get your minimum. It's a very straightforward solution.
As a result of this decision, what happens next?
Well, the answer is that no mayor in Minneapolis, whether Jacob Fry or any other mayor who might get elected in the future, can allow the police force to drop below that minimum ratio. So the city had actually taken the position before we brought this lawsuit, because we argued with them and sent them letters saying, hey, you need to voluntarily change your behavior. And they had taken the position that the mayor can do pretty much anything he wants, has full discretion, and doesn't have to hire a minimum number of officers. And that just, of course, paves the road for police defunding and dismantling. So now that the Supreme Court has decided that minimum is a legal requirement, clearly understood, no mayor can allow the police force to go below that.
Let's talk about the practicalities of solving the problem, right? We need solutions. There are recruitment challenges, not just in Minnesota, but across the country, or not just in Minneapolis, of course, within Minnesota, but across the country. Officers are making decisions because these are both career decisions, sometimes life-altering, potentially bad decisions for themselves and their families, for that matter. They're going to other departments, and they're going where they are backed up by city policy, these mayors, they're mayoral agencies. So solutions to this, how does this play out in Minneapolis, and is there a path to recruit and train enough officers to meet what the court has decided?
Yes, there is. And I think that at the end of the day, money talks. I think that when people who are very service-oriented people, I would say all police officers are, many of whom are former military members who served our country well and who want to continue serving the community, money isn't everything, but when you're putting yourself in danger, you're essentially taking a job that has a higher risk, you need danger pay. And so Minneapolis does have a foreseeable path to changing its current recruitment situation. What they need to do is they need to offer proper incentives, and it may be signing bonuses, it may be better terms of employment, it may be better mental health and wellness provisions. It also includes rebuilding the core services rebuilding department in Minneapolis, which means to add more field training officers who are actually responsible for training probationary officers and helping with recruitment. There are lots of different avenues. And I think, David, if you look at Seattle as, believe it or not, an example, even the mayor in Seattle has recently put out a plan saying, hey, we've got a way that we can reverse the issues we're having with our police pipeline. So I think Minneapolis does have solutions going forward. And I think Minneapolis has had those on the table literally the entire time our lawsuit's been pending. So it's about time they started, doing the right thing and taking those measures.
My guest, James Dickey, senior trial counsel at the Upper Midwest Law Center. I hear everything you say, and here's what I hear also from police officers, police families, if you will, the legacy families especially. I have a few friends who in the past months, year, or somewhere in that range, have said to their children, don't do it. Just don't do it. We have police academies that fail to meet even their recruiting goals across the country. All your points about the service-oriented, the desire, understanding the job, the mentality of the individual is important, and it should be. But then you have very little change, even court order included. When I look at the policy structure, there needs to be a policy change and a policy direction change in these cities, not just in Minneapolis, or they're going to continue to fight this recruitment battle.
These are excellent points, David. And I think that, on June 9th, 2020, when 9 members of the Minneapolis City Council stood up in Powderhorn Park in South Minneapolis and said, we are going to defund and dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department, that was probably the worst thing that any politician could have done in terms of the morale of police officers and their families, basically throwing them under the bus and saying that they are the problem when they are, in fact, the solution. So you make great points, David. I think that, from our legal perspective in our lawsuit, we have a particular goal in mind of how to address these issues. But from a policy side, I think the people of Minneapolis have to make decisions to put people in power who are going to support the police officers of Minneapolis if they're going to continue to see an improvement in morale.
Yeah, I mean, the people made the choices. The question is, are there enough people to counter those choices? If I look at the history of policy and evolution of policy from city halls down to the police chief's desk, if you will, and down to the precinct level, that doesn't happen without that leadership at the top and the city council support. So, again, I'm a practical guy, as an attorney, right? In the end, it's got to be what do you win and how do you affect the win? How do you put it in play? And in the meantime, the citizens pay the price because this won't happen overnight. You mentioned field training officers. Police departments are being deliberately hollowed out by these policies and these unelected bureaucratic elements being put in the way. On top of that, James, what's your take on the support staff? I know the conversation's often around the police officer who's on the street, that precinct level, but within that precinct, you have to have support, whether it's police employee, civilian police contractor, whatever the case may be in a particular city. But in Minneapolis, what's the status of that? And the reason I ask that is I look at Seattle, who you mentioned earlier. Seattle has taken itself down to a point where they had to announce a couple of months ago that they could no longer investigate new allegations of sexual assault in any manner. And it was because they not only hollowed out and attacked the police force on the streets, but the structure within the department that was necessary to make the casework go was also hollowed out.
Yeah, so Minneapolis has an issue with civilian components of the police force as well as the sworn officers being diminished. And in fact, I think that the civilian officers, and by that I mean non-sworn officer component, has decreased actually even more substantially relative to the total number of people in those positions from 2020 onward. In 2022, I know that they added back into the budget and rehired a bunch of civilian side police employees. And I think that the answer to your question is, going forward, there certainly does need to be additional support on the civilian side of things. Our lawsuit specifically focused on the sworn officer component, but I think it's inherently true that when you add officers, you need to add people who can, take calls and who can do administrative work that officers who are on patrol can't be doing at the same time.
Are there any next steps necessary in light of this Supreme Court decision in the state? What next?
Yeah, so the next thing we're going to be doing is we actually are going to have an evidentiary hearing, a trial, if you will, on August 19th. It's been pushed back from August 1st to August 19th. And the mayor has to show that he's essentially done everything possible to keep the police force from dropping below the minimum. If he doesn't, either the parties have to come to some sort of an agreement, or the court's going to have to order that Mayor Fry take all steps necessary to reach that minimum. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that is important. I mean, all our points are important in this discussion. You get to that point, all steps necessary. What if the mayor says he's taken all steps necessary, demonstrates some steps, but it's not successful?
I think that the answer to that is that the court has inherent authority to deal with public officials who don't comply with an order. And I think there are a bunch of different possible creative solutions. When you get to that point, certainly contempt is not out of the question if the mayor just doesn't want to do what the court orders. I am confident that that's not going to happen. But at the same time, we certainly are thinking through what it might look like if the mayor of Minneapolis does not want to obey a court order, which is, basically a worst case scenario, especially for our clients who are seeing just a hail of bullets ripping through their neighborhoods, shooting, kids 3 years old, 6 months old, 6 years old, doing all kinds of criminal activities, killing young people, hurting families. Enough is enough. And I don't think the people of the north side of Minneapolis are going to stand by and allow that kind of thing to happen.
I wish you good luck. Please keep us updated on this. My percentage of skepticism on Jacob Fry's history, I've followed him for some time, not just around what happened in Minneapolis with the riots, the looting with Floyd. You look at what's happening now with Cassandra Yarbrough. His silence, his statements, both combined. Let's just say I'm skeptical of his actual actions.
Well, I think that your skepticism is warranted. We had a court order in place. We had to go to the Supreme Court, David, because the district court originally gave us the order in our favor, saying that the mayor needed to take these actions. The Court of Appeals reversed that, and then the Supreme Court restored common sense and reaffirmed the decision from the district court. But in that meantime, before the Court of Appeals decision, Mayor Fry did have an entire year to take all these actions that the court is going to have to look at to see whether he's taken. So, I share your skepticism to some point, but, David, we continue to fight the good fight here at Upper Midwest Law Center, and we're hoping that, instead of having this ongoing dispute, that the mayor will come around on these issues and do the right thing.
I certainly do, for the citizens of Minneapolis who deserve much better. Somebody supported him, put him in that office, and that's a concern. If there are enough that support what he stands for, this battle is not going to be over anytime soon, but we'll see in August. James, look forward to a follow-up on this.
Thank you, David. Appreciate your time.
James Dickey, Senior Trial Counsel at the Upper Midwest Law Center. We'll see. We'll be following up with him in August. 866-95-PATRIOT.